Good morning. This is a follow-up video, mainly for Angela actually, after going to Buttocks's. I appreciated your offer to come up to the panel, but you see it doesn't work like that for me, unfortunately. I can't even come in a chat really, because as you saw how they'll jump on me, and as you saw how you yourself have not seen me in a chat. Probably, I think 3 times I've seen you. The only times I've really seen him is when he's been trying to chase me off panels. But anyway, that's a discussion for another time. My point was that when I offered to speak to you, I did say very clearly that I would do it under neutral settings. Neutral ground, I think that's the most efficient way of doing it. It depends on the purpose of why you want to talk to me, doesn't it, Angela? Do you know what I mean? Do you actually want to have a conversation? Because I do actually want to have a conversation with you. I don't have any prejudices of you. Some of the things that you were saying led me to think that there are certain, and the way that I've seen Dean operate, I have to say, now you can argue your point with me, of course, on that one, but from my opinion, the way I've seen Dean operate, it's very difficult, I would imagine, to exist alongside him and not take his way as quite a dominant way of doing things. And so, and I've got evidence to back that up if you ever want to talk about that later on. And it just made me laugh that, one, you were very quiet until you realised I wasn't coming on. And then you just expect me to just drop everything and put myself in that sort of situation. You knew I wouldn't. And so it was actually quite cheap. It actually came across as quite cheap. Under these same circumstances that I declared at the beginning, yes, absolutely fine. Something neutral. Now you can come back to me with ideas of where that would be or what that can be if you want to do it. You had an actual point which I would like to discuss with you, which was the point where you're saying I'm self-inserting myself in an entirely male-dominated area and that I shouldn't be doing so. And the result of this is what happens because they hate me and they don't want me here and I shouldn't be here. Which, wow, cheers, sister. Back to the dark ages. What's it like over there? Have you got his pipe and slippers ready for him or what? But my point is like, maybe I don't want to hang around painting nail in the painting nail community, if that's what you're telling me to do. Maybe I do have an interest in computer games. Maybe the only reason why women aren't in this is because they couldn't be arsed. Maybe you could be part of this if you wanted to be. And maybe the reason you are part of this is because of me and because I stuck my neck out and put myself in here. Because I don't see any other reason why you'd be here if what you're saying is true. Don't you think? So anyway, we can carry on this discussion and I'd like you to take on board, like, to knock off the sort of prejudices and things like that and sort of knee-jerk reactions which are going to cut us back from having any sort of discourse on this or debate if you want to. Because if you don't, then what you were doing there was kind of cheap, wasn't it? Because you're just throwing stuff out literally without really knowing what you're talking about, just so he doesn't have a tantrum at you, so he doesn't give you the cold shoulder, so he gives you that extra glow that he bestows upon you when you behave correctly and you do the things that he wants you to do. Yeah, and he's in a good mood then, isn't he? So if you want to do that, we can do that for a bit. Say, oh, I'm obsessed with your man and all that. It's yeah, you can have that for a laugh or that for a bit, but really, you know, it's a higher standard than that here. We do need to have more points than that and a little bit of depth even to accommodate. And also, it's really old. He was the one who started it. He also did that with like multiple people. It's not even anything new. It's just literally knee-jerk reaction. Number one, and it's just the first thing that happened. So I'd rather not go over that Groundhog Day again, especially when all the evidence proves otherwise. The fact that I actually wouldn't go on that panel that night is because I said I won't go on a panel with Dean, right? And that's not because I'm obsessed with him. The reason I wouldn't actually go on a panel on that night is because I don't actually want to talk to Dean and I don't actually want to be in the same room as him. He gets far too much from it. He is the one obsessed with me. But that's, you know, we could say that forever and ever and ever. The evidence is there. Yes, my channel is in defence of attacks, which you have now proven with your statement, where you say, oh, this is all because you're a woman. That's what I said from the start, and that's what I've been fighting. And they have been arguing until that night when he's trying to prove to you that he's this civil person and I'm fucking crazy. That has been what he has been arguing against for like what, a year and a bit now. Same with Albert. They've been cooking up this story, that story, bringing down people's channels around it just to put pressure on situations, just for that. And it's like, fair enough, whatever. Don't piss on my leg and tell me it's raining. Do you know what I mean? So if you do want to actually have this discussion, I'd be well up for it. I'm just not doing it sat on his fucking knee, all right? And so if you want to independently have this, there's plenty of space for women to have discussions in this community. And if not, we can forge it. There's space for everyone. It's the fucking internet. What do you think there is? Like, only so much space? We're in a fucking empty, dusty corner where nobody goes. There's plenty of space. So I don't know why you get drawing all the lines up and saying, oh, this bit's only for blokes and this bit's only for women, when it's, what, 2024 now? Is it because you look after old people that you think like this? Well, let's... Over here in my country, we have a little bit more to-ing and fro-ing going on. And people are allowed to talk on the internet about computer games when they haven't got a penis. So we can actually discuss that. Anyway, you'll probably, you know, I know what Dean's take on it will be, because he's threatened by the fact that I can just be a human about these things and not just be like, turn my head against someone, judge them for something, take a snapshot of them, make them into this sort of ghoul or something, and then just keep throwing hate at that person and coming up with gotchas and these little creative ideas and lies which can sort of bolster his thing, like, you know, oh, I love him and I fancy him and I follow him round and all this, when he knows that's not the case because he knows I can't stand him. So, like, you know, he's doing all these little things and whatever, but that's fair enough. But there's a lot of hatred going around there. And he just can't stand the fact that I can have a conversation with anyone. He showed that to me by the fact that I could be civil to Lewis, and he hates that. So I don't think he'd let this happen. I think there'll be every reason in the world why not to do this. I'm sure you'll come back with them. Probably mainly disparaging me and all the rest of it. But the offer's out there. If you can come up with a neutral place, that's great. If not, maybe I'll be able to come up with something further down the line. But I do think you did bring up a good point about that male-dominated environment. It is something that I've brought up in the past, and I found it highly entertaining that Dean decided to just flip it completely that night without saying anything and just be like, oh, yeah, that's right. And it just shows you, doesn't it? But yeah, it's all a laugh and everything, isn't it? It's just that Dean does, I do think that, this is just my opinion, Dean takes it too far, and that's what my problem is with him. You think it's an obsession. It's not. It's that his style is very, very different to everybody else here. And what he did is he came in and he hid behind a lot of people because of his failing YouTube channel, and he wanted to just drag this place through the shit to get some traction for his channel. And what he's done is he's just destroyed his channel more than he could ever do, to the point where he's had to make a separate channel. He's fucked up with it, you know what I mean? And he could have just carried on the way he was and just not been a dick, and things would have been a bit different. And so, because it's not so much karma, but like, if someone's ruling by fear and being that antisocial, it's just not gonna work, is it? You know what I mean? So you can lie, you can make your smear campaigns, you can do your propaganda, you can wrap it up how you want, you can sit there with your rose-tinted glasses on, lying to yourself as much as you want, but at the end of the day, those antisocial actions have consequences. And you look around and you see how his relationships are with people, you see what he's done to this community, what he I can imagine he does everywhere he goes, because he just doesn't ever stop and have a word with himself. You might not be aware of this, but actually right at the beginning, when I was first here, there weren't many women at all. In fact, there was only one, and that was Eve, YQ as well. But there was only that one woman, and she was welcome. And there was a lot of misogyny and all that stuff, and people doxing girlfriends and all that stuff, but that was fine because women could exist in that environment. It was fine. You can ask Eve, just ask Eve where all the negativity came from and when it started, because that's part of what I'm fighting against, you see, because it all changed when your man came in and brought his hatred, brought his negativity, and utilised, not necessarily coming entirely from him, although he's fine with it, but he utilised other people's, and he knew how to whip them up. And so that's how he made his safe space, you see. Because I think you already know a little bit, you must do, even if you're in denial, that he has to have a safe environment, otherwise he feels threatened and otherwise he kicks off. That is evident. Anyone with half a brain who's looked at this situation and seen that this 56k channel has come in and wiped out all the smaller channels just to make it safer for him and just to make his lame content look any better than it is. And that's as simple as it looks to me, you know, there's nothing more, nothing less to that. But I think when you're coming in saying these things about norms and things that happen in our community, you're only looking at it from the point of view of what happened after it's been affected by a parasite and changed in a completely different way. So just because someone comes in and decides that women aren't allowed there anymore and that all women are bitches and need to be stretched out and the rest of it, and I'm not supposed to stand up for that, am I, when we were all right before? Just have a think about that one, will you? In addition, I've got a couple of extra points to put on from my response to Angela from last week, which I still haven't put up yet, which I will do when I get home. It's ancient, but it all still stands up. But my point was, just thinking about it now, you're saying one of your arguments was that I'm obsessed with your man, right? So, like I said, that's a very old argument. But let me just say, there's only so much you can say to yourself without any evidence, isn't there, really? It doesn't really matter what the rest of the world thinks to yourself. And so, the evidence is clearly there. I go on very rarely. I go on one stream, which isn't even his stream, once a week for about 10 minutes. And if you're going to say that that's obsessive, right, and he focuses on me, right? So this also, obviously, like I said before, this is a defence channel against him because he started attacking me, right? So we've got that, but you've got to ask yourself, mate, why is it that you're saying that to yourself when it is clear that that's not the case, right? It's not about me saying, oh yeah, he said this and she said that. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, just think about it to yourself and just go, hang on a minute, why am I saying that someone who goes on someone else's stream for 10 minutes a week is obsessed to remove all argument and all defence from this person? The second thing I'd like you to ask yourself is this thing about me being obsessed with him and being in love with him. Right, so I'll ask you, how often does that happen in real life? How often do people fall madly and obsessively in love with him? Apart from you, of course, you've got your reasons, I'm sure. But take yourself out of it. And how often do you see people, do you have to beat them off with a stick, do you? Is that what it is? Is it that regular that it's just you take that as a reason without questioning? Or do you think there might be another reason why you're just taking that? Because there's no proof, is there? There's no evidence to prove that. In fact, the evidence is clearly the opposite. Because he's the one who they've admitted they were jealous because I was spending time with evil. And he even admitted last week that the whole thing is because I'm a woman. So, again, you've got to ask yourself, Angela, why are you taking all this information just straight from him when there's clearly no evidence? What is your purpose for that? Now, if it's just to troll me for the laugh on that one stream, and I'd get that. But if it's to defend him, and you're buying into that, and you're buying him into his delusion, and he thinks that he's more superior because of it, then just have a think about that, mate. And when I say about asking yourself about when people fall in love with him, falling about the place, wherever he looks, whoever he speaks to, whoever he has an argument with, whoever he has a disagreement with, whoever just stands up to his bullying, everyone's falling in love with Dean left, right and centre. And I imagine that the blokes, unless they're gay, because obviously that'll be one, and then the other one will be that they're crazy, I'd imagine. So yeah, how many crazy people are following Dean around? How many women are throwing themselves and falling in love with him? And how many gay guys just come out of the woodwork as well? Because all of a sudden the world is two-dimensional and there's just this cast of three people, isn't there? And Dean, who's right, and that's the fantasy world that he's expecting people to step inside of, Angela. So I'm just giving you a little word of warning, just keep it real, you know what I mean? And one last thing, I did think about what you said about obsession, because as I've said to, I think it was Ricardo before, I don't dismiss things out of hand, you know. So thinking about it, you know, I haven't got a huge amount of free time as it is. And so I would honestly say that my online time, I would honestly say that I only give this a third or possibly at most a half of my free time, which isn't much, because the rest of my time, although it's not free, is spent with my family. So I'm talking like just time to myself. I would say I'd split that. And the reason I do that is because it's a creative outlet for me, and I use it when pressure's put on. That's when the muses and that's when the art comes out. So I'm just using that as a creative focus, because at the end of the day, this guy came in and I'm not letting him get away with what he's getting away with. I'm not letting him get away with taking over more and more and more, because it will never stop for him, because he's trying to fill a black hole, you see, and he's trying to do it, and he'll do it to this and then he'll move on to another one, like he did with his last one. And I bet he's not got many people hanging around from there. We never see any of his old mates turning up, do we? I think once you've experienced something that's a little bit more interactive and a little bit more collaborative than watching Netflix, it's a bit hard to go back to that. And I also think, for me, and it's all psychological and things like that, we all need our needs met in different ways, and see how Dean has to control the external environment because his internal is so destabilized. And a lot of the reason of that is, I think, because he just doesn't ever want to look at himself in the eye in the mirror, and that's as far as it goes. So it's like we all have to suffer for it, you know. We're just here trying to do our shit, and he just, under the guise of trolling as well, because actually I find that trolling can be a bit of an art form. So for me, it's kind of offensive. He just walks in and he calls this trolling. It's not what I call trolling. So it's very low grade, you know, and there's that part of it where I'm like, oh, preposterous, that's fair enough, you know. But for me, it's interesting because there's a lot of psychology at play here. There's a massive mix of people, massive Brownian motion of groups, and it's interesting to see the followers and the leaders and what people do and what people do under pressure, how real people are, and seeing the little cracks in people when they come and how hilarious that is. That's trolling. And that all reflects back to you and your flimsy argument that I'm just obsessed, because there's a lot more to it than these two-dimensional pieces that Dean's painting up for you. And what's happening here is he's obsessed with our community. He has to take every little bit out, because any comparison to him shows how fake and how much of a fraud he is and how he's bought everything. And it's getting to the point, the crunch, do you know what I mean? He's trying to avoid the crunch as much as he can by just getting rid of everything so there is no crunch. So I ain't going to let that go, because that's funny to me to watch that guy squirm, especially after seeing what he's done to everybody. So you may see that as an obsession, but all it is every time he shows an obsession towards our community, it gets reflected back at him. So it may appear to be obsessive, but that's because it's coming from him. So you've got to just look at what was the origin of all this and where did it come from? How has it been executed? And what was the purpose?